we see him today. It's going to be the first time. Warren Duffy, please welcome. Thank you.
Nice to meet you. So that's what he looks like. That's what everybody always says. Perfect face for radio, right? Thank you for coming today. Can we give Georgia a round of applause for her? Turn to the person next to you and tell them, I'm glad you're here. Now turn to the person on the other side and say, I'm glad I'm here. I just got back from Rome. We were spending Easter over in Rome this year. On Good Friday, we were outside the Maritime prison where Paul and Peter had been held just before they were executed over there. We read the last two chapters of Acts and the book of Romans sitting over there, and it sort of gave a whole new complexion to our Easter season. My stepson's name is J.R. Maupin. That is a very unusual name. His family is from Ohio, which is a very unusual place for an unusual name to come from. So you can imagine our shock last night when we turned on the television news and they identified that young man who we see in uniform on TV now being held in Iraq. You know where he comes from? Ohio. You know what his last name is? Maupin. We haven't yet figured out if he is in fact related to our family, but it's kind of a sobering experience because my stepson is 23 years old, and he could very well be that young man, Maupin, who we're seeing on television today. Sort of drives that war home, doesn't it? I want to invite you, if you would, to stand with me for a moment, because Matt Maupin is not the only one who's being held over there in Iraq. He is not the only one whose life is in jeopardy today. In your own way, before we bring on our panel and have what I think will be a very interesting afternoon session just before your lunch, would you, in your own way, take this time and pray to God for those who are in harm's way this morning over in the Middle East? And dear Father, we pray also, as brothers and sisters in Jesus, that we will have the courage to stand firm in that which you have revealed to us as being your divine truth. We don't want to live in fear, Lord. We want to live in freedom. We don't want to live as victims of terrorism. We want to live as brothers and sisters of our Lord Jesus. Lord, bless the families. Be with them today. Our hearts cry out to you, Lord. Give us your peace as we pray in the name of the Prince of Peace. And everybody said, thank you. Our president briefed the country this week on what's going on in Iraq and in the war on terrorism. He put it into the context of making the world and our country a safer place. For this next hour, before we get to an afternoon full of, by the way, you're in for a treat this afternoon. You're going to hear from Dr. Bob Morrig. And boy, he is, yeah. I only wish I didn't have a wedding to go to. I would sit here, and I am his biggest, if he had a fan club, I'd be the vice president. But I want to introduce you to a panel of guests who are going to look at a variety of issues with us from varying perspectives. First of all, I will address them with a few opening questions. That's why we have the chairs over here. And then we're going to have a little time for audience participation. So if you have been saving up any questions, if there are any issues that you would like to ask our various experts their opinions on, we would ask that you keep your questions brief. we're more interested in hearing their opinions, honestly, than yours. So we'll get to that too soon. We have a dear brother in the Lord who began his life as a Muslim in the nation of Sudan. All of us have heard about Sudan and the fighting there, the Christians from the south who are being tormented by the Islamic government from the north. We estimate now that 2.2 million people have died in the nation of Sudan since the beginning of that conflict back in the middle 80s. Our guest is a former Muslim. He has spent many years working with the Family Network in Canada. Would you welcome, please, Ali Abdallah. Ali. Ali, you're fired. No, that's another show. Bob, would you come forward as I introduce you to our audience? He's the president of the Coptic Christian Egyptian Association of North America. I think you all got a flyer that was just handed you that was presented by Dr. Iskender. The Coptic Church, please have a seat. One of the major religions, as you probably know, in Egypt, many people feel that it was founded by Mark, one of the disciples who went to Jesus after the went to Egypt after the resurrection. The Coptic Church, we will find out a great deal about as we meet Milan here today. He's going to be speaking to the growth of Islam in Egypt. We know that Dr. Amman al-Zawahiri, who is the number man to Osama bin Laden, is an Egyptian, and the Islamic Brotherhood, which later became most of these terrorist groups that we're hearing about around the world, that was started there in Egypt. And so our expert on Egyptian Islam and terrorism and the Coptic faith, Milan Eskinger. Would you welcome? We had invited Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez to be here today. Is anybody disappointed that Congresswoman Loretta Sanchez is not here today? We've got a great substitute for her. John Brunton has been on my program on KKLA. He's running for the 56th Assembly District seat. Rudy Bermudez holds that right now. But John is a conservative brother, a very successful businessman, and he has some thoughts that I think are going to be very valuable to contribute to our discussion today. Would you welcome John Brunton? Running for Loretta Sanchez's seat, and I hope she gets it. The preceding was a paid political announcement. Dr. Alexandria Coronado is a member of the Orange County Board of Education. She's an SC grad, has an earned doctorate in music education. She's president of the California School Board's Leadership Council. She's a mom, she's a small business owner. She helped to conceive and put together the Parental Rights Handbook. So you as a parent know your rights concerning your child's public education. We have a lot to discuss about how Islam is finding its way into the schools. Would you please welcome candidate for Congress, Dr. Alexandria Coronado. And from Orange County Supervisor Chris Norby's office, a man who back in '92, he was an administrator for a multi-physician medical center in Anaheim. He was the guy who opposed, they had a city utility tax that they were putting in to the city of Fullerton, and our guest, first of all, he organized an opposition group. And when the city wouldn't listen to him, he decided to put together a recall campaign. And guess what? The majority of the city council was in fact recalled, and the city utilities tax was eliminated. Would you please welcome a long-time veteran from Orange County Supervisor Norby's office, Chris Whitaker. Would you all have a seat? And Bruce, I'm going to start with you. You can sit over here if you like. Let me take you back to July 4th, a couple of years ago, out at LAX. By the way, this is unscripted. These guys don't know what I'm asking. Back out at LAX, we had a guy who had sent his family back to Egypt. He had a bumper sticker plastered on his front door that said, "Read the Quran." He walked up to the El Al ticket counter, fully armed, and shot some people on July 4th. Very quickly, Mayor Hahn, Governor Davis, the FBI, rushed up to the microphone and said, this couldn't possibly be terrorism. I'm sure you've heard about the incident. You think that's true?
True that it wasn't terrorism? You know, there's an awful lot of crime that is committed, and often law enforcement is left to try to define or categorize that crime. To the victim, often it doesn't matter whether it was terrorism or whether there was some other motivation. I think the concern that we have is to be able to identify likely persons who will be committing crimes for whatever reason. There was, in that case, in my opinion, some factual basis for believing that perhaps there was terrorist intent. And I'm very surprised that LA County officials moved so rapidly to try to discount that possibility. That would not normally be defined as good law enforcement practice.
Are you satisfied that with what we know about, well, let's be honest, a porous border to our south? Are you satisfied that there isn't terrorism in operation in Orange County? Do you think that there could possibly be terrorist cells here? And is the county ready if we're attacked?
Well, first, if I may, I just wanted to welcome people to our area, which is the 4th District of Orange County. It includes Anaheim, Buena Park, Fullerton, La Habra, and Placentia. And a lot of you are very aware that in Anaheim, particularly West Anaheim, we have a very multi-ethnic condition, many Arab Americans, many people of differing faiths. So Orange County is very aware, and I hope prepared, for terrorist activity. And we know that that terrorist activity has a fairly safe and welcome base of operations south of our border. So I know for many years, some of us also up here on the panel have been actively engaged in trying to increase awareness and improve security at our southern border. We continue to encourage that, and I work closely with Sheriff Mike Corona. The area of county government that I focus on is public safety, and Homeland Security is an increasing area of attention and concern.
Thank you. Thank you. Would you pass the microphone down? We have one over here. Let me ask you a question. As an Egyptian, we hear the term Sunni Muslim, Shiite Muslim. We're now hearing a term called Wahhabism. Can you tell us anything about that sect of the Islamic faith? And can you also shed some light on what happened with Anwar Sadat? And how was Dr. Ayman al-Zawahiri connected with that plot? And how did he get so much influence for Osama bin Laden?
First of all, I really appreciate that you're giving me a chance to be here with all of you. And also, as a brother in Christianity, and as a part of the body of Jesus Christ, to believe to you have the Christian, generally speaking, the Christians in Islamic country are suffering, and they've been suffering for a long, long time. You asked a very good questions. It's not just only one question, but so many questions. And to answer that question needs at least one day. Wahhabi. What are the Wahhabi? The founder of Wahhabi is Ibn Abdul Wahab, who was from Saudi Arabia, and he started his missionary after getting some education in Iraq, in Baghdad, and went back to Saudi Arabia. And he claimed that Islam in the other Muslim country is not Islam anymore, because it deviates very much from the Quran and the teaching of Muhammad. And he started his mission by applying, by all the forces, using all the Islamic talent, as we say, in terrorizing all the people in Saudi Arabia to follow the Wahhabi. If we go through the whole Wahhabi education and philosophy, it's long. But what is the product of Wahhabi? Muslim Brotherhood in Egypt are one of the products. What's happening in Saudi Arabia, in the other Islamic countries, are also part of the Wahhabi products. It's the Islamic, the very fundamental Islamic, crude Islamic as is, which is that the Quran put some conditions for who is the Muslim and who is the non-Muslim. And non-Muslims, all of you are non-Muslims, all of you are infidels, should be killed, should be eliminated. Similar like that. I have so many verses here, I can read it to you to prove my point, but it's not. Anyhow, we know lots about Shiite Muslim, which mainly in Iraq and in Iran, and I don't have really to go in long in that, because we know Khomeini, we heard of him, and we've heard of his principles. Sunni, Egypt, the Muslim in Egypt are Sunni. And let me give you a very short theology comparison between the Sunni and the Shia. Shia believe that Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is the one who was supposed to be the first Caliph. Not only that, some of them, they claim that Prophet Muhammad got Quran by mistake. Gabriel did a mistake. Instead of giving the message to Ali ibn Abi Talib, he gave it to Muhammad. And that sect, they call it Al-Ghurabiyin, the crow. And he couldn't differentiate between both of them because they are very similar. Anyhow, I think Dr. Mauri can elaborate in that much more than me, and you know better than me in this area. I am very concerned about your brothers and sisters in Egypt. In Egypt, there are not less than 15 million Christians, the largest Christian minority in the Middle East. They suffer lots. They've been killed. Their churches been burned up to this moment. Up to this moment. They're taking money from left and right, from USA, from the West, and they are really trying to get somebody like Mubarak to stand behind the peace. I don't think that these characters who cannot bring peace in their homeland cannot bring peace in the Middle East. I'm very sorry to say that they are crook. They are crook. And they've been torturing us for a long, long time. I hope by the help of the West, by the help of the Congress, United Nations, human rights, we should stop that. Thank you very much. I think I missed the part of the question, but
you did very well. Did you do very well? Now, if you go up the Nile River, little geography lesson, if you go up the Nile River to the next country in Africa, you come to?
Sudan.
Sudan. Ali. We heard how threatened Christians are in Egypt. Give us your first-hand account. What's going on, really, in the Sudan?
Thank you very much. There are many things. Fortunately, your question is going to have very recent information. I just came from Sudan a week ago. I was there. When I left Sudan, I wasn't a Muslim. I wasn't a Christian. I was a Muslim. And this time, after 13 years, I went back as a Christian. And it's the same situation when we were there in the beginning of the 90s. We said Sudan is for the Sudanese people. It doesn't matter what your color is, doesn't matter what language you speak is, doesn't matter what religion is, the Sudan is for Sudanese. But there are a lot of bunch of people, and started actually from Egypt, and these are the Muslim brethren who came to Sudan, and they have seen Sudan one of the places that they can harbor a lot of work so that they can accomplish the mission that they want Sudan to be the capital of the Muslims who are going to govern the world. And this is since long time, it's a plan. And by the way, I am from Canada, and I went, compared Sudan with Canada, I found Sudan one of the richest. It's richer than Canada, and I say that. And these resources, they are minority of Muslims, and those people are very well educated. They know what they are doing, and they have their plans well placed, and they are dividing their roles. Even if now you hear, if you see the things, people think when see things in Sudan, the group in Sudan is divided into groups. That is just a game, and they want to see who is waiting for that change in order to cut him away. And the Christian people in Sudan, actually one of, I visited one of the churches there. It is a Baptist church in Sudan, where it's just near the house of my brother. It's just a house. But when I went there, they said to me, first of all, because they know that I'm coming from a Muslim background, they have to make sure that I'm not security. And that brings a lot of spirit of fear in the Christian people. And we don't talk about the poverty that they are living in. We don't talk about the way that the people look at them as the second-hand people. Any Christian, even when I went back to my family, they look at me as a second man, as a second person, just second citizen. And these are the situations that the Christian people living in. I remember this is about 14 years ago, I was in prison. They put me in prison because they just think that we are opposing the government. They put me in a cell with that man was singing a song, and each time he sing this song, every morning, every evening he sing this song. But when I asked him why you are in this cell with me, he said I'm a communist. And exactly those are the people. There are only two kinds of people, whether you are with them or you are a communist. And the communists, those are the Christian people. And at last, when I became a Christian one day, I was repeating this song, and I found this is a Christian song. And that brother was a Christian. And they put him inside the prison, and the only reason that they said he is a communist, but he is not. There are thousands of them. There are many of them, they cannot take a mic like this and speak about not only Jesus Christ, just speak about what you feel. Even if you want to say, I'm feeling tired. I was talking with one of my brothers that they did one of the Bible exhibition at the University of Khartoum. This is in the street there. And I remember one of my friends, I praise the Lord, now he's a Christian, but he drove his car into the tent of the Christian people and nobody talked. And even when the complaint went to the university, they said these are Christian people and you can do whatever because they are infidel, and the infidel not only you crush them by the car, but you can eliminate them. They are not human beings.
It is an incredible situation in the Sudan. Aside from the 2.2 million who have been killed, we know of tens of thousands of young men and women who have been taken captive and then sold into slavery. I met one of those young men, Charles Bach was his name. He was taken into slavery when he was a youngster of about 9. He served 5 years with an Islamic family. They forced him to live in the pig pen and told him he was one of the pigs, and they beat him with a stick every day. Finally, there was a group from Canada that you're probably aware of, and they collect money, and they go over there and redeem these slaves and send them back home. Isn't it interesting that the United Nations knew about that situation? And whose side do you think they came down on? They condemned the guy who was raising the money and going over and buying the slaves because the UN said that's just going to foster more people to claim they are slaves so they can get money. Does that make any sense to you? Dr. Coronado, if you'll grab that microphone, please. The war in Iraq has us all troubled. How do you think the president's doing?
I think the president's doing a very good job, although I must say, and I think he's right on this issue, and I think thousands and thousands of lives have been saved because we got Saddam Hussein out of power. I think that was incredibly important. However, Duffy, I do think we're fighting a different kind of war here at home with our media. And I think the media has control of this issue right now. And it's really time for the president and the White House and all the people that help him in his public relations department to go and take that back from the liberal media, because they're not getting the message out. You know, it's really important for people to realize that before we went in and actually, you know, cleared out Saddam Hussein, we're getting blamed for the Iraqis not having any water. We're getting blamed for them not having electricity. It's not true. The infrastructure when Saddam Hussein was in power was never there before we got there. And we have up and running 270 hospitals that the Iraqi people can go to. The water is flowing, the electricity is on, business is humming. These are not the messages you see every night, even on Fox News Channel, which is the most conservative news channel out there. So it's important for the White House and the President to get that message out, and I intend to do that.
A very good friend of mine is Congressman Dana Rohrabacher, whose wife, by the way, is expecting triplets anytime in the next week. She's as big as a whale. Dr. Coronado, why do you want a thankless job like being a congressperson? You have to get on the airplane Sunday night, you have to fly back there, you have to do business with all of these, the John Kerrys and Ted Kennedys of the world. Then you get back on the airplane, come home, get to spend a couple of days with your family. I know you got a daughter, I know you love her dearly. Why in the world do you want that job?
Because somebody needs to go to Washington and represent the people of this district and do what's right.
I was getting comfortable here. I thought it was going to be a long answer. That's the best short answer I've gotten today. Let me toss one over to you, John. You as an up-and-comer in the world of politics, new onto the political scene, and planning to go up to Sacramento, and you know that that is a very, very liberal place. Nonetheless, we've got this security issue down south, our border with Mexico, and who knows where terrorists might be lurking. We are vulnerable in any number of places. How would you make California a safer place for all of us?
I think one thing we need to do in the legislature is stand firm and send a message to Washington that our borders need to be secure. And we're going to have to find a way to put leverage on the federal government. One idea that has occurred to me is there's an enormous number of taxes that are collected on behalf of the federal government in this state. Perhaps we can start looking at some way where we could restrict sending that tax income to Washington until they start making a serious effort to close our borders, because it's costing us billions of dollars every year to provide services, to round up, well, for instance, the illegal who came across here and murdered one of our sheriffs and is now hiding back in Mexico, and Mexico won't cooperate with letting us extradite him. They know where he is, but we can't go get him. There are a number of issues of that nature, I think, where we can start applying pressure on our federal government and make them understand we're done. We're mad as heck, and we're not going to take it anymore.
Where's Gail? There she is. Stand up, would you, so we can recognize you? That's Sean's wife. Let me ask you, on behalf of Gail, why do you want to do this? I mean, why do you want to? You're a successful businessman. You've had a great career in a couple of different areas. Why? I asked this of Dr. Coronado. Why do you want to run for office?
Well, as people of faith, we've been commanded to spread the good news. And more than that, I believe that when you see right now, the most underrepresented person in Sacramento is somebody who owns a home, has a family, drives a car. But even more than that, more underrepresented than that are people of faith. Because not only does our legislature currently not respect our beliefs and help promote our beliefs, they are actively working against our beliefs. That needs to change. And I came to the conclusion one day that as long as I wait for somebody else to go make a difference, I'm going to be waiting a long time. And it's time for all of us to do whatever we can. This opportunity has presented itself to me, the doors were open, and I believe that God has opened the doors and has led us to this decision.
Microphone back to Dr. Coronado. I want to ask her, since she's our education expert on this panel, is it true that Islam is finding its way into our public schools? And if that story that I have heard is true, what can these, as parents and grandparents and uncles and aunts, what can they do to keep our children's minds from being invaded by this?
Well, first let me preface this by, how many of you are parents in the audience today? I need for everybody that is a parent or that plans to be a parent one day to understand how the process works in California, because I think it's important that when you understand the chain of command, so to speak, on how this gets into our schools, then you can stop it at the door when it comes knocking on your door. First of all, you have a group of people in Sacramento that are appointed by the governor called the State Board of Education. And the State Board of Education actually decides which textbooks for different classes can be used in the public schools. So for instance, a few years ago, they redid the social studies grouping, which we used to know as history when we were all in school. And they picked 3 books, And they said to every school district in California, these are the 3 books you can use for your high school history classes. Now you get to pick one of these books. So all the local school districts said, okay, these are the 3 books. And they put together parent committees, and every school district has a parent committee that oversees your textbooks. And they said, okay, we're going to pick this book. Well, when I was on the board at Anaheim Union High School District, we had a book called Government in America. And this book had an entire chapter of Islam and 2 pages on Christianity. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's balanced. And I do believe that we live in America, there are all kinds of religion, and that we do need to let people know the backgrounds of the different religions and these kinds of things. But we need to do it equally. We need to give the same 2 pages to Islam that we give to Christianity, that we give to everything, unless you're in a Christian school. Because the public schools just are not going to operate that way. Now, you ask me how to stop this. What I want every parent in this room to do is to call their school district Monday morning. And I want them to ask if there is a textbook committee review, or textbook review committee that you can sit on. And let your school district know that you're willing to volunteer a couple of hours each month to review these textbooks. Because that's how you're going to stop this from getting into your schools. There were social studies books, Duffy, that did not have anything about religion in them. They were strictly history about government in the United States. But the school districts weren't choosing those books. And that's another problem, and that's where the parents can come in and you can help. And it's extremely important that you pay attention. If you have a high school child right now, or even a junior high child who's in a social studies class, go through their book and read their textbooks and find out what's in it. And if you don't like what's there, then call me, and I'll take care of it for you.
All of a sudden you feel connected. I want to open this up to you if you have any questions. Bruce, you okay?
I can add very quickly.
Yeah, go ahead.
You touched on the topic of education.
Yes, sir.
And under the guise of all politics being local, I believe that's one area that families and parents really need to get to the table in terms of starting to make a difference. You mentioned the recall in Fullerton a decade ago that I was involved in. Well, I was involved, proudly so, in 2 very important recalls last year. Now, this was outside our normal office activities. It was on my own time. However, I am a directly elected official for the county party, the Republican Central Committee, and I'm an executive member of that committee. Almost 2 years ago, I was contacted by Ron Unz, who had led the English-only initiative. And he was very concerned that in Santa Ana, that the school board was defiant and wasn't following the requirements of that initiative. I was very proud to work with Ron Unz initially on the Nativo Lopez recall, which happened early last year. Helped to convince him that the political route was longer lasting and had a better final effect than to go the legal route. Ron was considering taking a lawsuit in that action, but there were a number of Hispanic parents who were just outraged at what was occurring in Santa Ana. And I encouraged him to go the recall route and not the legal route. Also late last year, the very important recall of Gray Davis. There were a number of our elected officials in the Republican Party, federal officials, that were highly opposed to that notion. However, the kind of damage that is being done in this state by Nativo Lopez and by Gray Davis was just incalculable. So to me, the answer was very simple. If the question is recall Gray Davis, the answer is yes. And working with Republican groups, we helped to energize them and helped to accomplish that last year as well. But back to the idea of parents being active in school boards, you know, what's happening in Westminster right now is another indication of the way that we are not being represented adequately, either locally or in Sacramento.
Primary concern today is with the Islamic religion and its impact on Southern California, on our schools, on our government, and on our world. I'd like to open it up to you. You've been a wonderful audience.
Yes, sir.
Over here, sir.
Yes, sir.
Let me give you a microphone. 30 seconds from now.
My name is Ernest Gobran from Houston, Texas. Even my background, of course, from the Middle East, and I am from the same country of Mr. Ali, and I congratulate him for his new faith, which I am very, very proud of it. And the second thing which I want to ask a very quick question about the politics of the United States. I wonder how come, we call it equality in the treatment, especially for the building of the mosque here, for example, in the United States. You cannot find a Christian church to be built inside the Arab countries. How we can solve this?
And I'll take it one step further. How much religious freedom is there in Islamic countries? We know that Muslims have a great deal of freedom in America, freedom of religion. But gosh, when the Taliban were in Afghanistan, it was Islam by rifle butt. You know what's happened in the Sudan, and we have a Muslim government in control there. We all remember Ayatollah Khomeini, right, in Iran, and how much religious freedom there was there. So let's start off with Egypt over here. How much Christian freedom, how much freedom of religion is there in a country like Egypt?
Freedom of religion in Egypt is zero. Zero. As a matter of fact, there is under zero. There is none. There is none. Okay, let's start with the Constitution of Egypt. The first phrase in the Constitution of Egypt, Egypt is a Muslim country. Although there are 15 million Christians, and I'm not exaggerating that, by the way. It could be more than that. As a matter of fact, can I elaborate a little bit on this, please?
Sure.
When the Arab, first of all, Christianity came to Egypt in 42 AD by Saint Mark. And when he came to Egypt, there were about 35 million Egyptians. When the Arab came and they invaded Egypt, the Arab Muslim, when they came and they invaded Egypt, there were about 40 million Christians in Egypt. There were 45,000 beautiful churches and cathedrals. That's when the Arab came, 642 AD. When Napoleon Bonaparte came to Egypt, I think around 1880 something, there were 2 million Egyptians, Muslim and Christian. From 45 million to 2 million. There were 450 churches. From 450,000 a church, there still 450 churches. The other churches were destroyed, demolished, and the history tells us about the Holocaust of the Christian in Egypt. The nun told the story of the Holocaust of 30 million Christians in Egypt, and more than that. The pagan didn't do what the Muslim did to the Egyptian, the Christian Egyptian in Egypt. And it's a nun told the story. We don't hear about it. We don't hear about the thousands and millions of Christians which been killed. Nowadays, as I said, the constitution in Egypt, first paragraph say, Egypt is Islamic country. Okay? What about me? I don't believe in Islam. I have all the right not to believe in Islam. You are Muslim? Fine. Be Muslim. You believe in the Quran? Fine. Believe in your Quran. But as a Christian, I don't believe in Quran. I don't believe in Muhammad. I that, will you let me worship my God in peace? No, you are infidel. You are not allowed to build a church. Building a church, ladies and gentlemen, building a church in Egypt, there are 10 conditions. You should satisfy these 10 conditions and the requirements. 10 conditions. They call it the Ottomani Hamayoni Decree. 10 conditions should be met to build your church. And then, after you satisfy the 10 conditions, you submit your application to who? To the President of Egypt. It requires the approval of the President of Egypt to build the church. How about the restroom? Broke or broken door. It required the approval of the President of Egypt. Later, when they found that President of Egypt has to approve repairing the restroom, so they thought, well, let us give it to the governors. So repairing the restrooms or the door required the approval of the government. But building the church, any church, requires Mr. Mubarak approval. The President said that one day he stands in front of millions of people and he says, I am a Muslim president for a Muslim country. How about the Christian? That was a green light to the Muslim to go and harass the Christian, kill them, burn the church. This is the freedom of religion in the Muslim country. Give me a break. Thank you very much.
Can you say something? Hold on just a second. Let me get a microphone to you. Would you like to ask a question or would you like to address that?
Popcorn.
Oh my goodness, you've lost so much weight. This guy has lost it. Is it 100 pounds?
Yeah.
100 pounds. What? Bob Morey Light. Bob Morey Light. No, that will be the day. Which one?
Well, very simply, the comment is this. American Christianity is studying its navel and believes the Great Commission is go into all the world and build big steeples, water slides, amusement parks. We are looking internally to our own growth, money, numbers. The world is burning down around us. We are Nero fiddling around while the church elsewhere is burning down. That's our problem. And the seeker church is part of the problem. We're just going to emphasize money, numbers, and buildings, and not souls and evangelism and what's happening.
3 sessions this afternoon?
Only one, 3 o'clock.
3 o'clock. Stick around. Bible study that I've just finished from Hosea. The book of Hosea. You know the story? One of the minor prophets, except he had a major message to deliver to all of us. He was the one who was told by God to marry a prostitute. You remember the story? It's coming back a little bit now. And he couldn't understand the message, but he was obedient to God, and he married this woman of ill repute. And he treated her extremely well. He loved her. And had 3 children by her. And then she went back to her harlotry. She went back to what she had been doing. She turned her back on love and walked away. And yet God told him, go and get that woman and bring her back. And he went to her a second time. And eventually that woman became so unlovable that he had to finally walk away. That was a lesson for Israel in their age. God loved those people. They were his chosen people. They turned their back on God and they walked away, and eventually became so unlovable that God caused judgment to fall down upon them, and the whole nation was sent into oblivion. I was talking with Alan Keyes a couple of weeks ago. We had dinner together. And Alan said some of the most chilling words I have heard recently when he said, "I don't think the angels of judgment are on their way to America. I think they got here on September the 11th. It is a sobering thought to think that America has perhaps become so distant from God that we are now unlovable by him. Sobering words to think about. This requireth much prayer. Thank you for being such a good audience today. Thank you for participation, which we had more time for questions again. Thank you to